Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Storm the Norm, the fortnightly podcast where we pick up norms that come in the way of businesses succeeding in a disruptive world. I'm Narayan.
I'm Anisha Motwani.
This is part 2 of our 2-part episode on identifying the best canvas for innovation. In the first part, we had looked at the flaw in the norm that innovation only comes from the edges, the outliers, the unusual. To explore this, we had introduced Santosh Desai, celebrated social, cultural, and business commentator in that episode. In this episode, we take it one step further to see how actually the obvious can be used as the most fertile canvas for innovation. Anisha, I just had a meta kind of epiphany. I guess in some sense, this podcast itself is an example of making the obvious a fertile canvas for innovation, isn't it? I mean, here we are every fortnight questioning the obvious, a norm, and making it the starting point of finding innovative pathways beyond it.
True, but that's such an obvious plug for our podcast. But why not?
All right, okay, let's get back to the task at hand. Do you want to do a quick recap of part 1 before we get to the questions at hand in this episode?
Sure, let me do this very quickly. Firstly, we said that innovation has turned into something very cool. It's the biggest buzzword in boardrooms today. And thanks to that, what's happening is that most people are actually trying very hard to get to innovation. So you would, in that quest to do something different and to do something disruptive, you are missing the obvious and you're starting with the edges. You're starting with the non-obvious. And that, I think Santosh told us clearly, that the starting point for innovation is not the non-obvious, but the obvious. And he also told us how to go about getting to that obvious, just by asking very basic, very stupid questions. And that's a great fertile source of innovation.
That's a great recap, Anisha. So let's get on to today's task then. So here we are. We have recognized and prepared the obvious as a canvas for innovation. But how do we apply it to business realities? And how can we deliver desirable business outcomes with this canvas of the obvious?
The last time I'd highlighted the 3 A's, ambiguity, agony, and apathy, as 3 key levers. The question to ask is, from ambiguity to what? From agony to what? From apathy to what? The answers seem fairly obvious when we ask the questions. From ambiguity to clarity, of course. From agony to ecstasy. You need to feel the joy at the end of your discovery. From apathy to empathy, because you want consumers to relate to your idea. You want the world to embrace it. So the overarching question that remains is, how do we go about it with the canvas of the obvious?
Important, simple question, but I think a really big question. Not to tease our listeners, but before you answer that question, shall we pick up the thread that we began with Santosh again and get his perspective on it first?
Yes, I think we have a lot more insights coming from Santosh in this new episode. So let's hear them first and then we'll come back to our discussion.
Sounds good.
Whole idea of innovation as against invention is the fact that you take something existing and you are able to see in it new possibilities, right? How do you do that? How do you do that? By just being able to see it differently, right? Be able to conceptualize it differently, to be able to see in it something that has not been seen so far. So the starting point is your canvas is the existing, and the more you sort of delayer the perceptions that have got embedded into it, the more clearly you can see what that existing is and what are the other ways of imagining it. Very often what happens is that the proximate right is what overwhelms us. So we are forever dealing in what appears to us at first glance. So unless you put yourself in a position where you are able to, and you ask the question that allows you to discover how your perceptions can come in the way, you end up believing that this is your starting point. And what you keep pushing is to say, is there a question, beyond that? Can you keep asking a question beyond that so that you get to a deeper and deeper level, a more fundamental level, a simpler and a simple level at a certain level, and keep pursuing the question of saying, till you come to the point where, okay, beyond this there isn't a question that I can ask. I think is one way to start an inquiry. Just more consciously you ask yourself, what are the assumptions I'm making? You force yourself to acknowledge that these are the assumptions. What would if something else changed, would this change?
Yeah.
Is this contingent on something else changing? If it is contingent on something else changing, then it's not timeless, it's not frozen.
So I think you've already reiterated this point that simplification is one of the most difficult tasks. I'm wondering, do we always need to simplify?
Normal is a statistical idea.
Yeah.
But in the way you use it, you give it an absolute kind of a flavor which it doesn't have. It's a statistical distribution, a normal distribution, right? And which is only
It's not a point.
It's not a point.
It's
right?
not a point.
You are able to. So this is exactly the point. The point is that you open out.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you end with this. You begin with this. The point is not to end with asking the stupid question.
Yeah.
You begin by asking a stupid question, and you then go where it takes you. Your understanding has to account for a complex one.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people who fetishizes, simplicity.
Yeah.
In fact, the interesting thing is that the most simple things are the fact when complexity begins to sing and begins to mesh together. That simplicity, simple and simplistic are two different things.
Exactly.
Right. So fetishizing the simple, which is rudimentary, is not the idea. But how do you get to that stage?
Yeah.
You get to that stage by asking. So you begin by asking stupid questions.
Is that to say that innovation can't or doesn't need to create exponential positive change?
When it comes to innovation, in some cases, a small innovation can produce a dramatic a difference. It can, and particularly when you look at the level of a firm or you look at the level of a brand, then as so many examples of some minor change, some small innovation that gives you disproportionate results, and equally an invention which is otherwise profoundly sort of significant in pure technological terms may have no market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the outcome is a product of context and the interaction of the innovation stroke invention with the context. There is nothing embedded inside the two that determines what is the kind of an outcome that they guarantee.
So how do you reconcile the pursuit of innovation, especially from the obvious, without it being outcome dependent?
No, it is obviously. I mean, in this case, you start by the one thing that I personally think is important is not to have the overhang of outcome, which intrudes too much into a process like this. You define the parameters of the process, starting with the outcome that you desire, but then you have to let go. The process of arriving at an innovation, there are times when you must ask questions for the sake of asking questions in the process. And there comes a time when you have to reel it back in and then sort of ask the more kind of practical, hard-headed questions. But if you are too narrowly concerned, how is this going to help me in answering this question? How is this, and which happens all the time.
Yeah.
So there is an impatience. And also there's a fear of your inquiry itself. And I think it's a peculiar fear people have. That the moment you go into uncharted areas, right, the moment you say, I always make this distinction about, using the sort of the Charles Revlon quote about, that old cliche about the fact that in my drugstore I sell, in my factory I make lipstick, but in my drugstore I sell hope. But the moment you say if it's okay as a quotation, but the implication of it is that we must be experts not in lipsticks, but in hope. Now, what constitutes hope?
Yeah.
Now, these are questions that a lot of people find. The moment in a business domain you start asking questions of this kind, it makes people uncomfortable because these are not questions you are trained to kind of answer. You know how to segment the lipstick market. You know all of that. But the moment what is the meaning of hope?
Correct. What line in the balance sheet does hope for?
That's so. I think part of the problem is the fact that the kind of this fear of asking questions and I'm going too far out into areas that are not natural. And therefore you use the crutch of existing label jargon that you understand, so that you stay in a safe territory, where you map things and plot things on. Then that's comfortable. The moment the problem with asking these kind of questions is the fact they take you into new areas. So while an outcome, the process of innovation becomes valuable when it results in an outcome, very often the act of opening out an inquiry may not result in an outcome today, it may result in it tomorrow, may not result in this outcome, but it may give you 4 other sort of insights into things that could lead to subsequent innovation. So, and you find this particularly if you come back to say the marketing world. So many times when we do invest in research and and you find that organizations have spent over the years like hundreds of crores of rupees on research, the large organizations, and yet the sum total of their knowledge is paltry, because it is not additive, because you only looked at, and so you opened out all of this, but you have been so seized of the outcome that you want that you have not looked at what else it could. And I'm always astonished. You go and pick out some stuff that there lying in the archive, and you say, all this. This helps you answer questions that you're grappling with today. But this was meant to answer another question. Now it's done. So I'm not interested in this as an inquiry by itself. And I think that is one of the big kind of. So in any innovation process, the idea that process of arriving at an answer, the answer is important. And eventually if you don't arrive at answers, then the process is not viable. But if you are so narrowly invested in the answer that you forget and you ignore the insights that you have thrown up, simply because they didn't help you this one time, then you are being short-sighted.
Yeah, absolutely. So fear, discomfort, outcome obsession, those are obvious obstacles to this. Let me try one other thing. Benjamin Franklin is reputed to have said that peace does not have the appeal that war has. Right? In a similar sense, the edge has perhaps a far greater appeal than the obvious. Is that something to contend with also?
Well, yes, to some extent, but I'll tell you, eventually what happens is that at its heart, again, what is cutting edge finally, So, eventually you have to construct the new with the old. There is simply no way you can construct the new with the new, because the new, both don't exist, right? Something has to exist to give birth to something else, right? So, you can use that label, but what does that label itself?
Wow, so much to unpack again. I'm going to take a crack at summarizing these insights from Santosh. Remember that the obvious is best used to find the critical question. Keep pushing for the fundamental question by delayering the problem. Strip it of all the distracting superficialities. Second, simple is not the same as rudimentary. Do not be afraid of complexities. Explore the nuances and fluidity. Recognize that the norm is actually a statistical distribution, not a fixed point.
That's such an intelligent point.
Third, define an outcome at outset, by all means. What problem the desired innovation needs to solve, make that clear. But don't become outcome obsessed. And fourth, remember that the new cannot come from the new. It must come from the existing. So the pursuit of innovation at the edge is a self-defeating prophecy, if you will, because it must start with the obvious. That's a lot, Anisha. I want to pick up one specific thread from all of this and pose a specific question to you, Anisha. You know that quote that Santosh used about Charles Revlon? We make lipstick in our factories, but we sell hope in our stores. That seems like a good starting point right there, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the point I wanted to reinforce as well. The pursuit of innovation will be fruitless if you start out searching for great ideas. I think instead we have to look for good problems to solve.
Now, Anisha, do you have, sorry for the cheesy title, but do you have the 5 fundas to give to our audience on how to align and leverage the canvas of the obvious?
We can't conclude the Storm the Norm episode without actually giving STN fundas.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So STN funda 1 is an idea that comes from questioning the obvious, trying to solve a good problem. When you get that idea, you need to feel the discomfort in the idea. The trick is not to fall in love with the first obvious spark. You have to flag it, park it aside, sleep over it, churn it in your head, let it brew and simmer for a period of time. And if it still gives you sleepless nights, you feel the discomfort. You don't feel the ecstasy or the joy. You should feel the discomfort in the idea.
I think Santosh referred to this as the temptation of the proximate. What's nearest to us, we're tempted to say, we have this, right? Let's go with it. Yeah. I like how you put it, feel the discomfort.
Feel the discomfort in the idea. That's the first one. Another interesting one is we should not allow reason to rely on its own resources.
Okay, that sounds very deep.
So what I mean by that is reason is logic, okay? And we have to discipline that logic with facts, with statistics, with data, with lots of forms of validation to make it more robust.
It's interesting. I'm telling you why I'm pausing over here for thought is because we've always heard people say, back your opinion with fact, back your emotion with fact. But in fact, what you're saying, back your reasoning.
Reason, yes.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all of us are guilty of it, including you and me. Our reverence for our education and experience means we rest on the laurels of our IQ and assume that our ideas are the best. And that's what's so limiting for innovation. Okay. So the point that I'm making is, if you really want to unlock a powerful innovation, you have to park aside your IQ and you have to embrace intentional ignorance.
I love that phrase, intentional ignorance. And basically what you're saying is that go in with minimum perceptions of what you already know. Go in without judgment of what is and what you know, and pretend you know nothing at all.
Yeah.
And then see where that takes you.
Yeah. And that's the point that Santosh was making.
Yeah.
You know? Just ask stupid questions.
Well, I like your phrasing. No disrespect to Santosh. I love that we need to feel discomfort. I love that we shouldn't rely on reason alone and its own resources. And I love this point about intentional ignorance. Yeah.
Thank you. The next one for me is actually, there's a research paper I was reading which said that when people face an uncertain situation, they don't carefully evaluate the information or look up relevant statistics. So what happens is you let your decisions be made on the basis of a lot of mental shortcuts. So you will start thinking in your head, if this happens, this happens, this. And these mental shortcuts are actually very detrimental to innovation. Once you have it, the purity, the creativity of innocence, you get a good idea, but then you put it through all these tests.
Yeah. Okay, that's 4.
And the last one, it's a little different from all that I've said so far, but we cannot underestimate the power of a support group in innovation, because there'll be lots of cynics on the way. There'll be people who will be waiting to pull you down. You will be going through your own dilemmas. You would want to drop it 100 times because something that seemed so sexy and so exciting to begin with, when you let it go through the challenges of execution on a day in and day out basis, it loses its sex appeal. Okay, it loses its excitement. And at that point in time, when you have, a support group, a core group that believes in your idea, that stands by you, by your side, that keeps nudging you, no, don't let it go. Go for it. Go for it. There is power in it. And that's for me is a very important thing for innovation to reach to its logical conclusion.
So what you're saying is it's not just Alcoholics Anonymous who need support groups. Innovators need them also.
Innovators need them more than anybody else. I'm telling you that.
I think that's a very underreported point over here. I think that's something worth highlighting as well. But fantastic. There are many things I've picked up from storming this norm. But if I had to highlight one that summarizes it all, it would be this. The journey starts by looking at the obvious. On the way, it encounters complexities, ambiguities, intersections that makes it seem impossible to move beyond to the end goal of innovation. But it is by finding clarity through all this complexity that one emerges on the other side with elegant simplicity. That is the true power of innovation that begins with questioning the obvious.
Since we've been talking about the obvious, the solution itself that you've come to should be very obvious. So there should be
Once you get to it.
obviousness in the solution as well. Only then it will be mainstream and it will have mass appeal. If it's not obvious, it's like, creating a new concept and it's like trying to fit into people's lives. Here, if it's obvious, it should naturally fit into the lives of people. So it's not just that you begin with the problem, as the source of problem as being obvious, but the solution that comes also needs to be extremely obvious. And that happens if it's elegantly simple.
So that brings us to the end of this 2-part episode. This is Narayan and Anisha signing off from episode 5 of Storm the Norm. You can catch us as usual on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud by just searching for Storm the Norm. We'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. Until then, thank you and talk to you soon.
Thank you.